Morning, everybody. This is Stephen Pugh. We're going to continue with our series on the City and Guilds Carpentry and Joinery course. And today we're going to be talking about installing floor joists. In fact, this comes under the overall subject of carrying out first fix flooring and roofing. So it's Unit 207 and it's install floor joists. And we're going to talk first of all about timber ground floor construction. Now, the thing about timber ground floor construction is that most people don't see it ever. People see upper floors and they see ceilings, but they don't normally see what's below the floorboards. And what's below the floorboards is floor joists. And the floor joists are not generally laid actually on a sub base like on concrete or whatever, or on the floor. They're laid on small walls. So they may not be very high. They may be 3 bricks high. They might be up to 10 bricks high, sufficient to be able to crawl underneath the floorboards to look at and to do servicing of various installations. But these floor joists then, they're laid across small walls. Now, the wall that goes across the middle of a floor, it's a small wall. It has holes in the center of it, which is called a honeycomb wall or a sleeper wall. And the joists rest on top of the wall, but with a wall plate in between. So the wall plate makes the surface consistent, and it also gives something to actually fix the joist into. And the only difference about these things is that sometimes there's a hearth, sometimes there's a fireplace. So around the fireplace, there will be hearth framing, and there will be a wall that goes around the fireplace, and that's called the Fender Wall. And sometimes that inner space within that Fender Wall is fitted with a concrete base or some other base. But the main thing is that the timber doesn't go too near to where it's hot. That's the point on a floor. The other thing about these ground floors is that there needs to be an airflow that goes through the building, and that means that there needs to be air bricks generally on both sides. And the thing about the airflow is that it must be across a floor. It must not be turning and going out another way in an L shape. It generally must go from one end to another end, and there will be air bricks on both sides which need to be kept clean, and they need to work in such a way that the airflow is not hindered by the construction. Now, there are a number of different types of joists. 4 we're going to mention here in particular. There's the bridging joist or the common joist. This is a joist that spans from 2 load-bearing walls each side of the room or the building. Then there is the trimming joist, which generally is a thicker joist, or sometimes it's 2 joists put together. And the trimming joist is on the side of where there is an open space. Now, there may be a trapdoor, or there might be a staircase, or there might be some other feature of the building. But the trimming joist is the one that's on the side of the big opening. The one that then closes the opening is called the trimmer joist, or the trimmer. And that's also a large timber. Sometimes it's 2 pieces put together. And then lastly, there is the trimmed joists. Now, these are joists that are cut off, and they're designed to fit into where the trimmer goes across. So you've got a hole. You've got the trimming joists on each side of it. You've got the trimmer joists that go across the 2 ends. And then you've got all the trimming joists which fit in between. Now, these are words which we just need to get to know about, because they're the basics of what being a carpenter is all about. Now, all of these floors are not something that necessarily get organized or sorted out by the carpenter himself. It's all done according to a plan. The plan will have been approved by the local authority, and it will have been designed by a structural engineer. And these regulations, there are 6 in all. There's the structural safety regulations. There's the approved documents regulations. There is a resistance to contaminants and moisture regulations. There's resistance to sound regulations, ventilation regulations, heat producing appliances regulations, and conservation of fuel power. And all of them relate to floor joists being installed. So there's quite a lot of serious regulations involved in the design of a floor. So we don't just put it down in the way we think best. We put it down according to the plan. That's how we put it down. Now we also use all sorts of timbers associated with floor joists, and very often the carcassing timber for joists is kiln dried whitewood. Sometimes it's called regularized timber, which is sawn to a consistent width and thickness, and Canadian Lumber Standard, or CLS, carcassing is planed and finished with eased edges for precise tolerances, and gives a consistent width and thickness, and most is graded at strength class 16. So this is how we look at the concept of putting joists down. Now we could give you a list of the calculations necessary for working out the size of joists, and there is a table in the book which can be referred to at any time, but we won't go into all of that now, because generally speaking, as a joiner, all of this is done for you, and you will have a plan and you will read the plan according to the specifications that are made. Now we're going to talk about upper floors. Now with upper floors, we have 3 different types of floor construction for upper floors. The first one is called single floor construction, and this is where joists go from one wall to another wall, and it's a single construction. Of course, the joists may be joined halfway across, they may be bolted, or they might be fixed in such a way that they don't sag, but the main thing is they're going from one wall to one wall, and that's called single floor construction. The second one is called double floor construction. So this is, again, joists that go from one wall to another wall, except that in the middle there's support. It may be an internal wall, or it may be a beam, whatever it is, whether it's a wall or whether it's a beam, it's supported in the center, and that turns it into a double floor construction. On double floor construction, very often, it's very common to have universal beams going across a double floor. And then the third then is triple floor construction. Now these are for really large rooms, so they'll have a wall each side, and they'll either have walls in the center, or they'll have beams supporting the floor at 2 points in the center. This means that you've got 3 floors spanning. Okay, so it's called triple floor construction. Now let's talk about the different types of timber joists. First of all, there's a new modern version called an I-joist. So an I-joist is made out of oriented strand board, which is like a board material. I think you've probably all seen it. It looks like chipboard, except that the chips are very large chips, and they're all orientated in such a way that it's a very strong and rigid board. However, at the top of the board and at the bottom of the board is a small U of timber. And that small U of timber is to enable fixing at the top and fixing at the bottom. That produces an exceptionally large and very long span. You can have them exceptionally long indeed. These are becoming the thing to do nowadays, and they are a great alternative to solid timber. The next one is metal web joints. Now, metal web joints are joists where you've got timbers at the top and timbers at the bottom, and various timbers now and again. But between the two, you'll have metal braces that are screwed on or nailed on at time to time, and it looks like a sort of a zigzag. The effect of that upon a simple frame is that the frame itself becomes exceedingly rigid, very strong indeed. They're very popular. They're very popular from the point of view that they're a constructed beam and they're delivered already made. So there's nothing for you to do as a carpenter except to put them into place. They're very light, as I say, and of course they don't use huge quantities of timber, but they do use quite a lot of metal work. So this is a galvanized steel metal work. The next one that you might come across, a little bit more rare, but they do exist, is laminated timber joists. So these are the large joists, large and that are made and they're constructed out of smaller pieces all glued together and then finished off as a large beam. Now, there are regulations about the type of adhesive that can be used. It must be WBP glue. But the main point is that these can be then made at any size that you desire, and they can be made at any width that you desire. They are they're very strong, and they are exceptionally adaptable. They can be made specific for the job itself. Very often it's very difficult to get hold of very large beams, and certainly to get hold of large beams that are perfectly straight, perfectly flat. So this is a way of being able to get over the problem of having large beams, large timber joists. Now we need to mention something about joist centers. When you look at a plan, and when you look at the plan that you're given for the laying of a floor, very often it will tell you what the size should be between each joist. And of course, it's not the distance between the joist. What we talk about is joist centers. So the middle of a joist to the middle of the next joist. Now, anyone that knows anything about this knows that you can put your tape measure on the left-hand side of a joist and measure to the left-hand side of the next joist, and that'll be the same as measuring from center to center. Now, joists are fitted into walls. They're fitted into walls either by being built in, so the joist comes along and it's actually the wall is built around it and the wall carries on up. So that's one way of doing it. So, for example, they'll put the blocks in, and all the joists will be laid on the blocks, and they'll carry on building, and effectively those joists are built in. And sometimes when they're built in, there's the thinking that they don't want the joist to be in contact necessarily with the actual brickwork. So they put a cap, a plastic cap, which goes on the end of each joist, and that is then built in to the wall. So that's another way of doing something very similar. Sometimes, occasionally, you'll get a situation in which a wall is built, an internal wall, and the blocks will have a wall plate put on them, and then the joists are put on top, and then the wall is then built again over the top of the wall plate, and away it goes up, which seems rather strange that we would have a wall built on top of a wall plate, but sometimes that occurs. And then the other way of fixing joists into walls is to use joist hangers. Now, these are metal straps designed to go into the wall and then come down the wall and come out and hold the end of a joist. They're exceptionally strong. They tend to be shreddedized, and they tend to be galvanized rather, and they tend to require special iron nails, which are shreddedized, which go in. As they go in, they turn. This makes them exceptionally difficult to pull them out, so they become exceptionally strong. Now, wall plates, we mentioned wall plates a moment. A wall plate is some timber that goes on top of a wall, and very often if you're on a double floor, the joists will come across onto a wall, and the other ones will come across as well onto the same wall. So this is where they join in the center. They don't have to join like that up against each other, halfway across. No, they can go past each other and bear completely on the wall plate. So you can get a very good fixing, generally by 4 nails down into the floor. And so there we are. There's our little introduction to the subject of floors, and we'll pick this up again on our next video. So look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. Bye for now.